Today's episode is sponsored by the American Homebrewers Association. Become a part of the U.S.'s largest community of homebrewers for just $48 a year by going to unitedwedrink.com/AHA. What exactly do you get with your AHA membership? How about a year-long subscription to Zymergy Magazine, the world's longest-running homebrew magazine? Exclusive deals and discounts at over 2,000 breweries, bars, and bottle shops across America. Discounts on Brewers publication books and merchandise. Access to a huge library of previous HomebrewCon seminars and talks. And early access to purchasing tickets to each year's Great American Beer Festival and Savor. Sign up now by going to unitedwedrink.com/AHA and get a year's membership for just $48. And if you sign up now, you'll get a free gift. What's that gift? I'm not saying. You need to go see for yourself. It's pretty great. Support United We Drink, support homebrewing, and support the American Homebrewers Association at unitedwedrink.com/AHA. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, coworkers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour? More like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a podcast that is a part of a well-balanced daily commute diet. Welcome to United We Drink, right here on unitedwedrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcasts, and wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich, and I am here all alone on this intro. Phil is not here for the episode at all. And Joel will be joining me a little bit later, and not too much later, because I can't do a monologue like this for all too long. We have a really fun episode for you today. We have a colleague in this industry, a person who listens to this show, and a person who I'd like to consider a friend in this industry. We're being joined by Matt Gilliland from New Belgium Brewing in Fort Collins. Matt has been with New Belgium for nearly 23 years. He's going to be celebrating his 23rd year working for New Belgium in the next month or so. He is the Brewhouse Supervisor there in Fort Collins, and he's going to talk a little bit with us about what all goes into that. He's going to tell us about his nearly 25 years worth of experience in the entire industry of beer. Tell us a little bit about the culture that goes on there at New Belgium. And this is a person who we have looked up to for a long time, and we are so stoked to have him here on the show. So I think without further ado, let's jump into this conversation that Joel and I have with Matt Gilliland, also known as Matty Smooth from New Belgium Brewing. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Oh yeah, the pleasure's all mine for sure.
You're definitely someone that I think that Joel and I wanted to have on the show once we started talking about, like, let's start doing some guests, because we had queued up like topics for like our first 12 episodes, and then as we were getting close to the end of that, we were like, maybe we should have some guests on. We know some people, and by that time, like, we had built up, I guess, a rapport with you, talking with you on Twitter, and I told the story before about how you like came and at the Portland CBC and like charged your cell phone next to us, was like, "Hey, can I sneak in here?" And Joel was like, "I was just in his seminar."
That's funny. Yeah.
Uh,
And I do remember you guys because I remember that moment because I had just gotten out of there. And that whole experience was kind of a funny story how that came about anyway. I wasn't really even supposed to be the guy giving that presentation. So, that's,
you were the
it's a lot
Dante
of,
Hicks of that.
right. Yeah. A lot of threads of fate wove to that moment.
That was a what was it? A dry hopping or hopping?
So yeah, I had just run through kind of our dry hopping technique and like how we, did a lot of science to arrive at that point. And what we have is now most of our beer is dry hopped, and we have this whole system where we can get all the beer in and out and the hops in and out in 24 hours or less. And, it's very efficient, works really well. And in the process of doing so, one of our chemists had read some of the earliest stuff about biotransformation. And he ended up dedicating his entire work time to doing biotransformation research. And we learned a lot about that, and he ended up publishing some pretty early on stuff about that. And then that informed kind of the second half of that talk that I gave in 2015. And now that's something everybody knows and employs, at least to some degree,
And now Tired Hands gets all of the credit for biotransformation.
I mean, there were a lot of people doing concurrent research, I think.
Yeah.
But they probably figured some stuff out that I wouldn't have known about otherwise,
Well, with the way that hoppy beers have changed over the last few years, I mean, that was 2015.
Yeah.
And, the hazies weren't at least intentionally upon us yet. How do you think you would give that talk today as opposed to 5 years ago?
Well, I think so much has changed now, right? And I think one of the things that I stressed at that time was using your hops efficiently, getting as much flavor out of the hop as you can, which I think, everybody owes it to themselves to do. Nobody wants to make a beer that is cost prohibitive in terms of hops, right? But also kind of the agronomics of hops have changed, and the hop suppliers have changed a lot. There's a lot more aroma hops in the ground. There's a lot more new aroma varieties coming out. So I would probably back off on the efficiency a little bit and just talk more about all the different things you can do with newer varieties and newer techniques, and the technology that people are coming out to kind of employ that, and even getting into using other hop products like that Incognito product that is biotransformable and very interesting to use. But again, I'd probably still say, let's make sure there's enough hops for everybody to go around. And there were only 5,000 breweries then,
And that was the big takeaway that I took from it, if I could be redundant and nonsensical for a moment. Because I've done different classes and seminars and things like that. And sometimes a lot of times they're taught or given by, guys that are on your size or even much larger, like macro, brewers. And a lot of the things they're saying are not easily practically applied to, the majority of breweries, because so many of them are so small. I mean, back then I was at a 15 barrel brewery. Now I'm at a 3.5. So, a lot of what, you had a lot of great information, but at least in my own case, it was not a lot that I could take back. But what I did enjoy, and I always try to find something in the seminars and classes, is, what you said about everyone having that responsibility. And I still think it's true to this day. It feels like there is a lot of irresponsible hop usage in the way that, maybe a decade or so ago we had the IBU wars. Now it's the tropical, how murky, how hazy, how gritty can it get, war.
Well, and that's the thing. I think the market has changed so much, right? People are willing to pay, $18 or $20 or $28 for a 4-pack. And I mean, that would have been really unthinkable 5 years ago, I think.
Oh yeah.
And so the way that a lot of brewers are now, treating their product has changed because they can get enough money to cover those costs. I was talking to somebody last year when we had a GABF that's from not far from here. And he was like, yeah, we did this, all these beer releases. We did 3 releases a week for months. And then we hit him at the end with this quadruple dry hopped, of a version of our normal beer. And I was like, that's cool. What are the losses on that like? And he's like, oh, it's 45, 48%, something like that.
Wow.
And I'm just like, oh my God, like you're then charging so much for it that you can afford to literally throw away half your beer.
Yeah.
And,
Oh my God.
you know, that's not the background I came from, and I'm still not there mentally. But people are doing it, you know?
We've been using at our brewery hop oils from Glacier hops. And I know they just did a webinar last week or the week before through the BA about some of their products, and about they've started doing oils now that are helping keep haze for brewers who are having issues with like dropout in their hazies. And
Which is such a problem, you know?
but what's funny, we use it in West Coast IPAs. It's just for an extra punch of flavor. We dose it going into our bright tank, and we're doing like 20 barrel batches, and it's like 30 milliliters going into there, and it adds a brightness to it that I can definitely tell. And this is another hop product that is helping keep allow our yields to be a little bit better. Like I think most recently our flagship red IPA that I just moved a few days ago, we got 39 barrels into the bright out of FV, like into a 40 barrel bright. That's pretty damn good, I feel like, for our IPA.
Similarly, we've used a product called Hop Aid that's an anti-foam that's entirely hop derived. And, you know, when we have a, you know, 1,400 hectoliter batch going into a 2,000 hectoliter tank, you'd think there's enough headspace there, but vigorous fermentation will kick it out of there. And so, yeah, that's helped us with losses and foam retention, especially.
Nice. Yeah. So you've been at New Belgium for how many
started
years?
December of 97. So I'm coming up on, 23 years there next month, which is kind of cool. But I'm not even the longest tenured person in the Fort Collins brewing department.
Has Jack been around longer than you?
Jack has been around a few months longer than me. Yeah. Okay. Jack Joyce. If you can get him to tell some stories sometime, that might be a good episode.
I have had the pleasure of hanging out with Jack before, where the previous brewery that Joel and I worked for. A couple times we went up there. Our owner struck like a friendship up with Jack, and like anytime we were up there, calls Jack, and he takes us out or like takes us into the brewery. We one time, me and another former co-worker, we went out to dinner with Jack, and like he's such a great dude. Like, and wonderful story.
Previous to his career at New Belgium, well, when I met him, he had hair down to literally his ankles. And he had spent several years on tour selling balloons in the parking lot of Grateful Dead shows.
Oh my God.
We all come from diverse places. Yeah. It's all good. But yeah. And even so, my wife also works in New Belgium, and she'll be hitting 25 years in February, which is kind of crazy. We met there.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's a cool story.
But it's weird. 23 is kind of an interesting milestone because I started there when I was 23. So I've literally spent half my life there.
Wow.
And you worked at Boulder Beer Company before that?
Yeah, I worked at Boulder Beer for a little over a year, and I worked at Left Hand Brewing for a little over a year. And that's when
you've been working in craft beer your entire legal drinking life.
Basically, I mean, yeah, it was like I started at Boulder probably a month or so after I turned 21.
Wow.
And had been homebrewing for several years before that. So, you could say my whole adult life has been dedicated to beer.
This is something you knew you wanted to do very early on.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, so I went, I thru hiked the Colorado Trail when I was like 19. And the Colorado Trail is the trail that takes the mountain route. It's about 500 miles from Denver to Durango, and takes you through all the high mountains of Colorado. You actually cross the Continental Divide like 14 different times. And it's beautiful. took us about 7 weeks to do the whole thing. And I got back and I had this beard, this 19-year-old with a beard. And that was like early in the very earliest stages of Colorado craft beer kind of blowing up. And I found that I could just walk into my local liquor store and be like, hey, have you tried this? And there was the guy that worked, it was this beer enthusiast. And he's like, oh yeah, and you got to try this and this and this. And I ended up developing this great taste for the newest craft beers that were out there, and being able to buy some of the classics. You know, I got into Box and Doppelbox, and I got into Weiss beers and was drinking everything Schneider Weiss put out. And then I shaved. And then, you know, that guy was like, hey, I don't think I've ever seen your ID, man. And I was like, yeah, there's a reason for that. So I was like, well, can I ever come back here? He's like, not till you're 21, obviously, but you can make this stuff yourself. And sure enough, the local homebrew store in Boulder was What's Brewing in Boulder. And one of the guys that worked there behind the counter was Paul Gatza. And he had been a brewer at Boulder Beer previously, and then turned into this crazy home brewer. So he always had a couple of his beers on tap in the store and would give you like advice and hints and stuff. And, you know, I was like, I think when I turn 21, I want to be a brewer. And he's like, don't be a brewer. You're never going to be a brewer. Like, you'll never actually get into the brewing side of things. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try it.
Challenge accepted. Apparently.
He did have the same hairstyle.
That was going to be a question. A follow-up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, but I didn't want to ask.
Yeah, that some things never change, and Paul Gatz's hairstyle is definitely one of them.
Paul is what's his title at the Brewers Association?
Like, I think he's maybe president or CEO. No, he's not CEO. That's Bob Pease, but he's like head of the Brewers Association, whatever the actual title is.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're unfamiliar, look him up. He has a fantastic head of hair.
What did you pour yourself over there?
So this is we make this pilot series beers that we make like 2 of them a month, and then do like a special can release. We actually bring a mobile canner into the brewery, even though we have a big high-speed can line, because we can't fill the pipe between our current bright tanks and the high-speed can line. It would actually be more volume than our whole pilot batch is. But so we do some interesting beers. We have a subscription club where you can subscribe and get, 2 4-packs a month for, I think it's like $18 a month or something like that. It's really reasonable. Wow. So people can come to New Belgium and still get a unique specialty beer every time, which is kind of fun. So this is a Dunkelweiss. One of my first real loves in craft beer and in kind of worldwide beer history beer. I like Weiss beers. We've been making this, we've been making these Cellar Club kind of specialty releases for a while. And my really good friend Cody is one of the pilot brewers. And he was just like, hey, can we use one of your recipes that you cooked up over the years? And I have this recipe for a Dunkelweizen beer, a strong Dunkelweizen that tastes really good. And I love the eugenol, the clove aspect of it, and the pepperiness from the phenols. So we actually add cloves and black pepper to this. Oh. And it's a really easy drinking, but kind of spicy Dunkel, clocked in at like 10%. So,
wow.
Shit.
And what size is a pilot batch over there?
So we have a 10 hectoliter system. It's like, 9.8 barrels, something like that. Wow. And we have 2 R&D brewers and then 1 actual brewer that works in the pilot system. And the R&D brewers we have a raw material procurement person for R&D. So they just come up with ideas for crazy flavors or real traditional beers or everything in between, and kind of throw it down the pike. I call it, when they actually are ready to scale something up, I call that portfolio bowling, because they'll take this new recipe and be like, sorry, bro, this is going to hurt, and just roll it my way. And they're like, that had to hurt. And I'm like, thanks.
So your primary role over there, you said Brewhouse Supervisor?
Yeah. So we have, we've got about 32 people in the brewing department in Fort Collins. And we have, like a department manager and then 3 supervisors that overlook different areas. I take care of the brew houses. My coworker Kelsey takes care of yeast and fermentation, and my coworker Andrew does all the blending, dry hopping, and filtration and finishing. So we're each in charge of a functional area, and then we're each in charge of 8 or 9 of the brewers.
So when like you said before, a pilot batch recipe comes and it is decided, hey, let's scale this up. That is your role to then scale it up.
Yeah. So I'll take what we have kind of this shared set of documents that flow through the whole process, and they'll actually build up, the recipe that's scaled for 10 hectoliters. And then when it's finally approved to move to the big system, I'll take that and actually scale that to whichever brew house we're going to start brewing it in. Each one has their quirks and stuff. So I have to kind of account for different efficiencies and how much aroma hop needs to get in to get the right aroma, that kind of thing. If there's weird processes, or, they want to put lime juice in hot side, or they want to, do some other kind of ingredient that we don't normally handle, I have to worry about that. And then what's really hard is I kind of have to also capture the spirit of the beer that they're going for. Yeah. Just straight scaling things up and using the same proportions of everything often doesn't get you the same beer.
No, not at all.
And so I have to go back to those guys and be like, what did you really want here? Are we really trying to showcase this hop, or are we keeping this spice real subtle kind of threshold level, or what does that mean? And so far it's taken several years, but I'm getting pretty okay at it.
I mean, I would say so. What's one in particular from that one that you think that you pretty much hit nail on the head as best as you felt like you could, and what was the most difficult?
So usually the Voodoo Ranger series, like the one-off series that we do for that, the rotators we do for that, they're, we'll just have a bigger malt bill than an existing beer and then change up all the hops on it. So those are pretty straightforward for me to scale up. Higher Plane is our current Voodoo Ranger IPA release. And that one was I could look what they were going for. I could see what hops were in it, and I could just write the recipe based on that. And then stuff I don't know if you guys had that beer Mural that we make. It's a collaboration with Primus out of Mexico City.
I had one of those when I was in Philly at a Mexican joint there.
So it's it's going for an aqua fresca.
Mm-hmm.
And it is beer. It's malt based, and it's just really hard because there's you have to get the color right. And so we add this hibiscus, powder for some of the color, and this hibiscus tea for some more of the color. And you have to get the watermelon lime flavor right. And so, we have to do the brewhouse recipe and then bring in usually a full F feed. We have to bring in 18 drums of fruit and pump that into the fermenter before we knock out underneath it. So then it's this big coordination effort and stuff. So those are kind of challenging. The other thing that I've come across recently is we've started doing a couple of beers that will advertise calories and carbs on them.
Yeah. And
getting ABV and calories and carbs to all match is a challenge.
Oh yeah. I never even thought about that.
They all influence each other.
Yeah.
They can run independently of each other, and different yeasts will even throw it out to where, you have more of an ABV, but more calories left behind and stuff like that. So it gets confusing.
Yeah.
And then anything that we have to blend with the wood cellar, because they're we want it to be this color after you blend it. So then you have to do all the color calculations to get what you're going to make in the brew house to blend with that and then get the color. Then they say we want to have it land at 0.6% titratable acidity. So then you have to figure out the volume to be able to bring the 1.2 sour base down to 0.6. And then they're well, we want, our sour base is 6, but we want this beer to be 7.2. So then I have to get the gravity for that right. And those are all, again, competing factors that you have to get to balance exactly right to make the blend that we want to have happen. So if you have a New Belgium sour IPA, give it some love, because it takes a lot of managing things to get there.
I actually have your True collab, Where I Live.
Yeah.
And
I had that a few weeks ago.
And the official glass.
Nice. Yeah, that was an interesting one to make too, because we had one shot. We made one, 100 barrel batch essentially, and it had to all get this, the right yeast, and then get into a foeder and stay in the foeder for a month. And one of the challenges we have is small batches like that. Small, and I mean 100 barrels is as small as we can go. Really, it's hard to do a batch that small. Like, just the amount of like water pickup you get in pushing out like the wort way is enough to throw the gravity off. And so you have to account for that kind of thing. You have to account for, a little bit of water mixing every time you move it. And this is a beer that got several movements. So those kind of things are like challenging. Like recently we got asked to do another 100 barrel beer. And I'm like, can we just do 200, find a couple draft accounts for it. We'll have 100% more chance of being successful.
So, that was, I noticed that's a 16-ounce can too. Was that done on your regular line, or was that mobile?
No, because that's enough volume to do it on a regular line.
Okay.
But it's also, and you'll notice there's a plastic overwrap on the can.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's too small to do a can run for. So we actually had to get labels made. And because, recycling sorting machines don't recognize that outer label, we actually made a kind of a zipper on it so you can
see that.
take the label off and recycle the can.
Yeah. Winwood down in Miami, they do that on their specialty run stuff too. They have a little line on it and they say like, hey, tear this off before you recycle it. I think that's pretty dope.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the paper label is great. Those are successful. But I like the idea of encouraging people to recycle in maybe a roundabout way a little bit. Be like, we're just made it easier for you.
Yeah.
Kind of fun.
Joel, do you have any other questions for Matt right now? I mean, not that we're wrapping up, but I feel like I've said a lot.
No, it's always fascinating to hear just the size and scope of things. I mean, I remember going there for the first time, I want to say it was like 2013, and just being in awe of the giant fermenters outside, and then going into the cellar and all of that stainless and the piping just going this way and that. I mean, for me at the time, being at a 15-barrel brewery and maybe putting in, I don't know, 100 grams or so of salts and things, and you guys just have massive pipes just pumping like phosphoric acid and caustic this way and that. I mean, it's when I sit back and think of just the engineering alone. And by the way, thank you for setting up that tour for me in Asheville.
Oh yeah, no problem. That was great. Who actually toured you around?
I'm sorry?
Who actually toured you around that day?
Oh God, it was a year ago and my memory is the worst. I know I've got it in my email from way back when. I'm failing to remember his name, but really good dude. Really took us around and showed us the ins and outs. I apologize. I can't remember the name at the moment, but that was like a year ago now. And, he like for an example of like the engineering and the scope of things, I remember him talking about how there was a certain area that needed to be like land had to be like tamped down and fortified basically to even take the weight of your equipment and building and everything. And when I think about that stuff, it's just my eyes go crossed and my mind goes blank, because it's like I can't even imagine the engineering that goes behind all that stuff. And it's the same when I go to like Sierra Nevada, or when I look at pictures of Firestone Walker, and like there's clearly someone who knows how all this stuff works, and I just look around and I'm like, I'm so blown away and intimidated in a way. Like, just how does this all come together?
It's funny because like I actually do all the hiring for our brewing team as well. And I get a lot of people who are like, I'm kind of interested in it, but everything is so complex. I can never learn all of it. And I'm like, well, one, you don't have to learn all of it. Like we have brewing divided up into different areas, and people just kind of specialize in one or two areas. So you're not eating the whole elephant, so to speak. And two, it's really a collection of a lot of simple things put together in a creative way. If you can figure out how a valve works and how a pump works and how to get liquid from point A to point B, that's half the battle right there, And I really do think anyone can learn that system. Some people take longer than others, so.
I remember, and at my last brewery, my boss was not someone who knew anything about beer or brewing, but I recall being on the tour with him and pointing at a pallet of bags of gypsum. And I'm like, see all those bags? I'm like, I'm still on my first from 2 years ago.
Yeah, typical shift. You'll have to throw probably 4 or 5 of those at least
Really?
in the brew house. Yeah.
Oh my God. That is just unprecedented, in my mind.
Well, it's funny because I get the other side of it too. I've been on trips where we went to like salespeople's best account. They're like, we just got this beer in 2 weeks ago and they've already been through 9 cases of it. And I'm like, that's cool. That's about 11 seconds on the bottling line. It's a different mindset.
Yeah, that was another thing when we did the packaging tour, and there's that TV display hanging from the ceiling, and we're looking through the window at it, and I want to say it was like 11 a.m. and there had already been over 100,000 bottles. And
yeah.
I started running the math, and I'm like, that's more than we brewed this year.
Well, it's funny. It's funny too, because I think about that. I haven't been in that building in more than 7 months because we've got everybody segregated out that goes to the brewery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a little bit mind boggling. And when, we've been doing like record can line weeks lately, and it's just the amount of cans that we go through. I'm thankful we have a contract, but even then they're still having a hard time delivering us cans. But yeah. We'll have, over 100,000 case weeks, week after week after week, even in like September when we're supposed to be slow. It's just a lot. I forget how much beer that represents to a lot of people.
We're having trouble getting just like a couple pallets of Brights into our place right now. We luckily our core brands are all printed, but like to do some of our other stuff in 12 ounce Brights, it's tough out there.
Right.
Well, and I know.
Go ahead.
Cigar City, or just Canarchy in general, Phil was talking about how they started reusing like brand cans that they like discontinued and using the sleeves on them. And then there was that whole thing a couple weeks ago, an article, I guess, about some guy who like tore one of those off. And I wish Phil was here to actually comment more on it or not comment on it. But it's just like, and they threw a fit that there was a different brand underneath the sleeve.
I mean, they're lucky to have a beer in their hand at all at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I think I saw a tweet or a post or something about that somebody had peeled off like a Dale's label and there was something else underneath it.
Yeah. I just, you got to be creative in some instances. And it's completely legal too. It's not like when people say you got to get creative and you're doing something illegal or shady, but like you got label approval, you purchased these labels, you got them applied to the cans, you have your everything in a row, and then one person goes and wants to make a fuss about it.
And what's funny is like the only thing you could possibly conceive from like having an issue with that is like this guy thinks the brewery is going to try to pull a fast one and like relabel. Right. Like who does that?
Nobody,
especially nobody that big.
Right. I'm bummed Phil isn't here because I have a kind of funny Canarchy related story. When I was a left hand, I was working with a guy who's, had been around for a number of years, went from homebrewing into brewing, and he ended up getting a job at another brewery, and he called me and the other brewers up a couple of days later. He's like, you guys got to come by here and check this out. We're doing something totally new. And I get there and he's like, check this out. My boss bought a 2-head canning machine and we're going to put Dale's Pale Ale into cans. He's like, they had gotten it the day before. They were just putting out their very first Dale's Pale Ale cans. He's like, you think this will fly? You think people are ready for beer in a can? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I'll drink it. I'll definitely drink those cans. But, that was kind of witnessing the very beginning of what is totally commonplace now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's history.
It wasn't day one first can or anything, but it was first week.
And I feel like I remember the first time I was out in Colorado in what year was that? 2009. That we went to Boulder and saw a little two-head filler that they had there for cans, and uh, and this was the day after we had been to uh, Longmont, the Oscar Blues facility there, and it's like, wow, two completely different ends of the spectrum here,
Right.
and just like what 30 minutes apart from one another. It's And now to think of like a two-head filler, you're like, the nano guys are using those things now,
Right.
but that was Boulder who was using that.
Yeah. And well, I mean, everybody's got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. But it's just funny because we had Boulder beer in Florida, and to go over to Colorado and be like, oh, this is where like
This is
hazed and
actually where this comes.
infused is made. Like, wow. It's just two heads.
Yeah, that was an interesting place to work. The first brewery in any town is never the best brewery in that town, for sure. And they
Phil
were the
actually
first.
has a great story about being yelled at on the tour of Boulder.
I can only imagine.
I can't remember who it was. You would definitely know. He's a longtime guy there. He's like a sales guy mostly, I think. But Phil stuck his hand in like a kettle, and the guy yelled at him. It was mostly joke in jest, but like
Right.
Phil did dumb things.
That's okay too.
What? So 23 years at New Belgium.
Yeah.
You guys are massive now. What was the barrelage output when you started there?
Oh, so that was 97. So we would have just broken 100,000 barrels that year. The December 97 when I started was their first ever 10,000 barrel month. And the interesting thing is, 0 to 100,000 barrels took 6.5 years for New Belgium. I don't know, like there's been some fast growing breweries since then, but I don't know if that record still stands. Because they started in June of 91 and hit 100,000 barrels in December of 97. But I think like Rheingeist came pretty close to that, but
yeah, they grew pretty fast.
But yeah, there were only, maybe 45 people that worked there at the time. And now we're well north of 700.
Wow.
And with all the people who've left that started before me, I think I'm like employee number 17 now. Something like that. But who keeps track of those kind of things?
No one. Now, I know one of the maybe touchy subjects was the acquisition last year.
Yeah.
What, if anything, has that you could even lie to us and we wouldn't even know. Is things still pretty much business as usual over there, or is there change for the good? Has it really, what all has happened over there since then?
So yeah, that's a really good question. So that sale actually went down. I think we first heard about it as employees about a year ago, beginning of November, and the actual sale went through, January 1st. And the Lion Little World Beverage, which is the Australian company that bought us, even though they're wholly owned by Kirin, they operate as an independent corporation. They have their own board of directors and stuff like that. Really, there's no management by Kirin at all. So I think one misconception is that we're run by Kirin, and that's not even true. Mm-hmm. And two, one of the reasons that they bought us first is because they kind of liked how we were doing things anyway. And so they've been very hands-off with everything so far. We were supposed to get 3 of their employees kind of stuck permanently in Fort Collins in March. That didn't happen. So we haven't really seen anybody from there except for the initial visits that they've had. And we've been running things exactly the same. The only thing that we've had is they've started putting our metrics up against some of their other businesses' metrics. And what they've asked us to do is like try to match, extract efficiencies and hectoliters per employee and safety incidents and stuff like that. Australians are huge on safety. So, somebody that threw out their back or something like that made us look really bad. But they haven't done anything to change anything at all. And the interesting thing is too, and this is why I say that we're their first acquisition, is because they earmarked like 8.9 billion to acquire U.S. craft breweries, and they haven't spent, but a fraction of that so far. So it's, I think we're going to be kind of the hub of maybe a network as they, go in and kind of cherry pick some of these breweries over the next several years. That is speculation on my part. I want to make that clear. I don't know if and when they're going to actually do that, but it seems like that's their intent. And we're centrally located and we're already relatively large. So I think we're going to be kind of the hub in their wheel. But
yeah, and I'm sure that COVID has changed a lot of things for the world. But I mean, being a big packaging brewery, even during this time, still isn't that bad.
No. We're well positioned the off premise. So, our numbers went straight through the roof as soon as quarantine hit, and they've stayed high since. For most of the summer, it streamlined our brand mix too. So it was like, we're used to putting out 20 brands a week, and we went down to like 8, and it was just like this dream come true. It's so easy to only make 8 brands a week. Now it's kind of creeping back up when we're making more specialty beers and stuff. But I think, do you guys get Beer Business Daily or Craft Business Daily?
Phil does.
Okay.
He will forward stuff to us every once in a while.
But they were saying like, Sam Adams is up like 12% and we're up like 35 this year. It's bananas. And that's with 2 packaging lines. We haven't run the keg line. We didn't run it at all from March to almost August. And we've been running it like a day a week since then. So to squeeze all that beer through 2/3 of our packaging lines, that's been an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
Did you guys send anything off to be distilled?
Yeah, we'll take dump beer, anything that's out of spec enough that we can't blend it out, or that's out of season. Like we brewed more than they were willing to take at the end of a season of some seasonal beer. And then we even have like beer from the wood cellar that's kind of gone too far. And all those we put in this blend tank and we can ship them off. There's a distillery in Denver that we've been working with for a long time called Leopold Brothers. At one point they were making like lawfully hand sanitizer, essentially.
Really?
Stuff that had been in the barrels for like 3 years and even had this faint, like, kind of wood cellar smell to it.
You guys did a blackberry whiskey barrel aged sour with them that I got at it was on tap at the GABF like brewers reception in your parking lot, and I that beer to this day. It was amazing.
Well, that's why I say we've had such a great relationship with them, because they'll give us whatever barrels we want. They make some really interesting whiskeys. And then, we can take a single barrel of something that made a really unique whiskey and take sour beer that's already been sitting in a barrel for a number of years and is soured anyway, put it in one of those cool barrels for 6 months, and you have a completely different, beer product and beer experience.
Real quick question, because I always forget. Oscar and Felix, which one's blonde and which one's dark?
Oscar is the dark one.
Okay.
Felix is the blonde one.
Okay.
Yeah. And that whole program's been kind of interesting because that essentially started about a week into my career at New Belgium.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's been around that long.
Yeah. And
because I feel like I've heard on the Good Beer Hunting podcast, like when they, because you guys were like a sponsor of the show, you did that series Into the Woods with them, that it's one of the America's longest like sour culture going on. Yeah.
So that day in December 97, we took 6 flasks out of the lab that had, some had Brettanomyces, some had, Acetobacter, Lactobacillus, even some Pediococcus. And we inoculated the first 8 barrels that we had. I carried a couple of those flasks out, and that was the last time we've inoculated anything with anything funky that went into our wood cellar. So since then, whenever we get a new barrel in, we'll put some beer from another barrel in and then just top it up with fresh beer and kind of let whatever happens happen. And then,
cool.
each barrel takes on its own kind of like unique characteristics because so many things influence it. Even where the barrel is in the room might be a warmer or cooler spot. Some barrels are tall and skinny, some barrels are short and fat, so they have different volume to surface area ratios and get different amounts of oxygen through the wood, so then they behave differently. And it just takes somebody going through and tasting them every week at least and really getting to know the barrels, because once the barrel's kind of established itself as having a certain Frico system inside of it, it tends to produce those flavors. So it's the blender's art is really understanding each barrel and what it's going to bring.
Did you say Frico system?
That I did, yes.
Is that a technical term?
No, but that's been the word I used to describe those barrels for a long time.
I
got it from
love
the
that
Onion.
word.
No, the Onion had an article about releasing hippies into the wild and how they contribute to the Frico system, and I thought that was freaking hilarious.
I have never.
I can cut that out and just pretend that you came up with that.
Okay, yeah, no, that is 100% my joke. I wrote it originally, and I wrote it in probably 1994 before I saw it in the Onion.
Done. Deal.
But yeah, and then so that's you guys probably saw that Twitter thread where somebody had found PH1, which was one of the original 8 barrels that we inoculated that day. And then it's been handed around to a few different breweries, but still with enough beer in it to keep the Frico system alive. And I went and took some pictures of PH2 and this one we call Inoc 2. There were the 2 of the same 8, just to share out that we still have.
Because Peter now has it back, right?
I believe Peter has it back at Purpose. Yeah.
Because I think it was Rare Barrel came across it, and then they gave it back to Peter after they used it.
When Russian River had it for a while, for a number of years.
Yeah, and
it was unknown to us at that point. Like one of our brewers went there and was like, "That's fucking PH1 right there. Like that's one of our barrels." So it had been given as a gift and then kind of lost to antiquity and then rediscovered.
I think that a series on, and this is not my ideas. This is Anya, her idea of having a podcast about that barrel and its voyage of would be fantastic, at least from a geeky standpoint of us people in the industry. I don't know if your drinkers might get it, but
there's an audience for that for sure.
Yeah.
I think that'd be fascinating to do. And I like the idea of starting with the most recent owner of it, and then working backwards until, the original inoculation of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know. That's one of those things that nobody knew that we were, we just thought we were making beer. Nobody knew that we were weaving this incredible story that so many different people were going to have a part in. But
yeah. And I feel like it's still not that well known of a story, and it deserves to be. And that's why I think that whole idea of a podcast dedicated to it would be awesome, because there are some really great stories that deserve to be heard in this industry that are just seemingly drinking stories. And I don't know if people know or care or whatnot, but maybe whatever seems entertaining to me might not be for others, obviously, but that is a story that I think needs to be heard.
Well, I think there's a lot of stories like that out there. That's just one of many. I think that, the story of who makes cans now, and take that all the way back to that day at Oscar Blues and Lions when they decided to put beer in cans and figure that out. That's an interesting story too. That's kind of a piece of craft brew history now.
At the very least, that barrel needs its own social media. I mean, right. There's an account for Garrett Oliver's hat. Right. The fly on Mike Pence's head had 400 accounts that night.
Oh yeah. PH1 needs its own account. and with a sour personality kind of. These kids,
It's like your Voodoo Ranger account.
Right.
Which I've seen some great stuff come from that one. really well run account.
That brand has taken off. So we're willing to invest in getting some good peeps for it. Because it didn't even have a Twitter account until this year, which is insane to me.
Yeah, to start a brand focused Twitter account, social media blitz, if you will, for something in 2020 is a risk,
right? Or it's the only way to meet customers.
That's true. Yeah, excellent point.
But yeah, it's kind of fun. All right, well, do you guys have time for another old time brewing story about when I was new as a brewer?
Yeah, please.
Sure.
So when I worked at Boulder Beer, just down the street was this little one-man brewing operation called Avery Brewing, and Adam Avery ran it. And he was so close, and we used a lot of the same ingredients and kind of process aids and stuff. Like if we ran out of oxygen during knockout, we could send somebody over to Avery and grab their oxygen tank if they weren't using it and bring it back and finish knockout. We traded, box of hops or filter pads or whatever. And so I was over there one day, and again, it was just me and Adam. It was him and his dad and his sister. He did all the production, his sister did all the sales, and their dad kind of helped out whoever needed help. But it was just Adam, and he's like, "Hey, I feel like one of the next big things is going to be IPA. So I made an IPA. You want to try it?" And I was like, "Sure." This is probably middle of '96 now, and there weren't that many IPAs out then. And so, he had some in a bright tank ready to go, poured me a glass, and it was this really great IPA. And they haven't changed the recipe much since. That is Avery IPA. That was the very first brew of it.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Kind of cool. And then I ran into him on the street after I moved on to my next job. And he's like, "You should come work for me. I'm starting to hire a few folks." I was like, "That's cool." And he's like, 6? I was like, 6 what? He's like 625. And I was like, "What?" He's like 650. And I was like, "An hour? Are you kidding me?" No way. I'm worth more than that. I was making 625 at the time. So actually it was not worth more than that at all. But yeah, it's just one of those things. I could have had a completely different career path direction had I taken him up on that. And that is, if that counts as an interview, it was one of the weirdest ones I've ever been in.
You played hardball on that.
Yeah. I'm like, dude, I'm worth 675, man. I'll take that to my grave.
I still have not been to the new facility since they've opened that. I've only been to the original one, just in the middle of that industrial park.
Yeah, that place was legendary for sure.
Yeah.
But the new one is nice because it really was designed by a brewer, somebody who really cares about the beer they make and stuff. And they put some bells and whistles into it, and they did a lot of engineering, but it's also, they have a lot of flexibility. They can make beers just crazy high OGs. They can do, dry hopping. They've got this big barrel room that's all climate controlled and stuff. And then the tour is all on these kind of balconies and walkways above all of the brewing operations and all the packaging operations. So you really get a better sense than most brewery tours of what's really going on.
Oh, wow. So it's all catwalked.
Yeah, it's all kind of catwalk above there. And then it feeds right into their restaurant, which is excellent. They always have 30 of their beers on tap. The guy they hired to kind of run it is this barbecue genius. So everything they make you're going to get a fantastic beer and a fantastic meal if you go there, for sure. And again, it's in a weird part of the Boulder area that you wouldn't normally go to if you had any reason to be there.
All right. Well, I think we can start wrapping things up about here. Since you are a listener of the show, I think you know what the question we've started asking every one of our guests now.
Right.
What is your go-to Taco Bell order?
So the last several times I ordered Taco Bell, I got 4 tacos supreme and a Mexican pizza. I understand the Mexican pizza is no longer part of the menu. I do have to say too, I haven't had Taco Bell in more than 20 years. So that was my regular order, but I haven't darkened the door of a Taco Bell in quite some time. No, I was a real dick in my 20s, and I was like, I'm not fucking eating fast food anymore, and I'm not fucking drinking soda anymore, or whatever. Now I'm like, is that so bad? It's not.
I've actually stuck to the no soda thing in my life, and I'm happier in that way, but I still do indulge in some fast food every now and then.
I am Crunchwrap curious. I would like to know what a Crunchwrap actually tastes like.
Crunchwrap curious. You heard it here first.
Yeah, I've never tried the Crunchwrap, but I've heard good things. But like, I'm a little scared.
I feel like when we're out there next, we have to bring you back.
All right. All right. I'm willing to do it.
Is there one in Fort Collins?
There's several.
Okay.
So I got a question for you guys.
Okay.
If you had to get up, and it was in a good situation, like with your friends hanging out, drinking and stuff, but you had to get up and just nail one karaoke song, what would it be?
Oh, God.
I don't know, because I feel like everything that I think I'm good at when I'm drunk, I am definitely not good at. Right. If I have to nail it.
Let's just say everybody has to have a good time.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's something that expresses who you are. People would expect it out of you, maybe, that know you well.
Wow. This might be the best question ever asked on the show.
So you know where I got this question from? Somebody I was interviewing asked me this question, asked the whole interview team this question. He's like, I want to get a feel for where you guys' heads are at. So tell me, what's your karaoke song? And I was like, that's a really good question.
For me, I'd say in 2020, it would probably be the Richard Cheese version of People Equal Shit.
Okay.
Oh God.
I don't know all the lyrics to it, so I probably wouldn't choose that myself.
It's pretty simple.
It's a cover of a Slipknot song, correct?
Yeah.
So yes, that sounds simple.
Oh shit. I would probably say I could probably nail When I Come Around from Green Day. Like Billy Joe has an easy-ish voice, I think, that I could replicate drunk or sober. Nice. And I know all the words to that. I'm not a Green Day listener anymore, more so to speak, but I think that I could nail that one.
Yeah, I don't know much after American Idiot of theirs.
Yeah, that's an American Idiot probably wasn't even that much of my liking, but yeah, so that's a tough one. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, I would say, if I had, they're like, pick one right now. I'm a 90s hip hop guy. Always loved hip hop. 90s is my coming of age, generational area. So I would go with probably the Humpty Dance. And if not, it'd be like Summertime, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince.
Yes.
Something like that. It's a feel good tune. Everybody knows it, kind of. I think I could bust out all the lyrics if I was really on the spot. So yeah.
See, my answer was almost going to be "It Takes Two" by Rob Bass.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good.
But that's more of like the only song I'll dance to at some function after I've had a few, because right. Otherwise you're not getting me on the dance floor.
Why do I feel like I have seen you dance on a number of occasions, Joel? John
Cook's wedding.
Yep, that's it. That is definitely it.
I might have even requested that song.
Matt, anything that you want to plug?
Yeah, let people know where to find you and everything.
Right. So, you can always find me on Twitter at Matty Smooth. I'm not a prolific tweeter, but I am a prolific reader. And if somebody, wants to call me out for something, I'll definitely respond. Yeah, and then I do have something to plug. You guys may or may not know any of this, but I have my own beer talk show that I co-host, and it's every Tuesday at 3:30 Mountain Time. It's called the TIL Beer Show, and we stream it live on Facebook and Twitch at twitch.tv/Voodoo Ranger Official. The whole thing is it's this live interactive show. Anyone who tunes in live can like shoot us questions and stuff, and we'll discuss, oftentimes with whoever's on the show. It's super duper fun. If you are a Twitch person at all, we do about a half an hour show and then transition it into whatever kind of the game du jour is. And a bunch of our brewers and stuff log in and all play together. And we invite all our listeners to log in and play together too. But we talk about anything. It can be beer, it can be brewing, it can be science. We talked about heat for a whole hour one time. So check it out. It's pretty exciting. And the more people that watch it and interact with it, the more fun it is.
Tuesdays, 3:30 Mountain Time.
That's correct.
So that would be 5:30 Eastern Time.
Yeah.
And do the math for the rest of them.
Right.
This has been a major pleasure and a lot of fun, Matt.
Truly, the pleasure is all mine. Oh, what I love about your show is it's just like me and my buddies hanging out drinking beer and talking about beer. And I listen to it. And even if I'm on my way to Costco, I'm relaxing and just enjoying shooting the breeze about beer. So I love it. And I'm, like I said, I'm honored. Pleasure is all mine to be on your show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
man. And on a personal note from me, being at New Belgium, both in North Carolina and Fort Collins, I mean, truly just times I will never forget. Even if I were to leave the beer industry, I would still look back so fondly on those times. Just some of the best days I've ever had. Whether it's GABF week or just being out there for whatever. Always such a great time. Love your beer. Love just the whole culture around you guys. Everything's been so great, and also a lot of respect and appreciation for the seminar. I mean, like I said, you really helped instill the right value for me when it comes to utilizing our resources. And that's something I'll always take with me.
That's really cool to hear. As a presenter, you don't ever really get much feedback. So I just thought I gave that presentation and people listened to it and nobody ever thought about it ever again. And then since then, I've heard a few people comment on it, like yourself. And I talked to a guy last year who had been a brewer at the time at Port Brewing. And he was like, yeah, they scrapped all their dry hop procedures and started everything fresh based on what you said. And I was just like, what? That's ridiculous. Who would do that?
Well, thank you once again, Matt. And again, this has been an honor and a pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you guys. It was good to chat.
Thanks.
Cheers, man.
Cheers, you guys.
All right. One more time, a big thank you to Matty for coming on the show. It really was a pleasure for us. We could have probably talked for a lot longer than we did. And it's kind of funny that for someone who we have mainly interacted with through social media, it feels like we know him so well, and like we could just go out and have beers and bullshit with him, just like he was talking about on the show, listening to the show and thinking about how it's like talking to his friends. And it means a lot to us because he's someone that we definitely look up to in this industry. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Make sure that you follow our social media. We're always on Twitter at United We Drink. We're on Instagram at United We Drink Pod. We are also on Facebook. The show can be listened to in practically any fashion that suits your podcast listening needs. Our website is unitedwedrink.com, where you can listen to the show. And we're on almost all of the major podcast services, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to podcasts, we should be available there. If you can't find our show on your service of choice, let us know. Drop us a line on social media or on our website, and we will do whatever we can to get onto that service. If you would like to support the show financially, check out some of our sponsors on our website. If you go to unitedwedrink.com/sponsors, there's some great services that we believe in and offering them up to you. Any purchases that you make through them go to support this show, pay for our hosting, and so forth. You can also buy a shirt, button, sticker, face mask over at our web store, unitedwedrink.com/store. Other than that, we will be back here in 2 weeks. Will Phil be with us? I don't know. We'll find out then. But in the meantime, everyone stay safe out there. Wash your hands, wear a mask, and we'll see you soon. Cheers. Real quick, Gilliland, is that the
Gilliland rhymes with
Okay.
Killaman.
How I could just Gilliland.